Our speaker for today is a dear EGN member from Indonesia, Michael Adik. Michael is a strategic change consultant, leadership coach, and crisis management expert with over 25 years of experience helping global organizations navigate transformation, uncertainty, and complex business challenges. As managing director at Tutuba, he worked with leaders across Asia and Europe to strengthen organizational resilience and master effective crisis communications in high-stake environment. Without any further ado, let's give a virtual round of applause to our guest today, Michael. Michael, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivana, for this great introduction of myself. So I don't need to do much more speaking about myself. You see my photo somewhat similar to how I look in the video because I'm trying to lose weight again. It's also crisis management. Either way, as a little bit more background, I'm originally from Germany. I've lived in Asia for 20 years continuously, mainly China, and then since during COVID on and off, so overall 25 years Asia experience. And in total, 28 years work experience, including apprenticeship program in Germany. And in this time, as everybody here who's rather seasoned or not so seasoned, I have, of course, seen a number of bigger and smaller crises. One namely was in 2008, 9-ish, when I was heading a strategic management team at Siemens Energy. We created a joint venture in South China, and this joint venture never produced any revenue by itself. So almost over 1.5 years, we had to manage stakeholder and investor relations. We had to appease clients, customers who originally wanted to order from that factory, and we had to shift orders from or production orders from Shanghai to Shenzhen. So that was one of the main crises at that time. And the second major crisis I was involved in was the closure of a relatively small subsidiary of a German mid-sized company in Shanghai. And that got me actually into a hostage situation because some disgruntled directors in the team tipped off a supplier that if they didn't do anything drastic, they would not get our payment, which was not true. It was a lie, but it was a pressure tactic. So I was basically in hostage for 8 hours, me being latently claustrophobic. It was a highly stressful situation, but we got out of this situation primarily through positive communication with the hostage takers. And at the end of the day, they got some of the money down payment, and I got a carton of cigarettes as a thank you by the hostage takers, a very local mainland Chinese way to say sorry that we took you hostage. So without further ado, I go into the topic. I have some experience personally about crisis management. Today, I want to bring you to basically two frameworks for crisis management. One is the Situational Crisis Communication Theory by Professor Coombs from 2007. It gives a very good overall framework on how to identify the crises in certain aspects and according to the identification, then to react appropriately and communicate appropriately. And the second concept is the 4R framework for crisis communication that is also fairly recent. Maybe the second framework is the 4R framework, which is pretty much about communicating, being prepared, dealing with crisis and communicating about the crisis and about the crisis resolution. These frameworks have been adopted by one of the greatest companies, automotive companies in the world. I was an instructor there last year for the program, just for some reference that these frameworks are seen as helpful by some global organizations. Okay, correct. we are on this slide participant survey. So to prevent myself to speak too much and give you also a voice, dear participants, I created a small survey. Okay, here's the first question. Exactly, are conflicts, crises avoidable? Okay, so let me see the results of this. So 11 should be responding. I got 7, maybe 8, okay, 9, okay. Maybe somebody who said no, somebody who rated no. Why did you say no?
Michael, this is Sammy. I think it's just human nature that conflicts are going to arise. You can do all the prep you can.
Right.
Can think of all contingencies, and conflicts will arise. I mean, that's why there are lawyers in the world. That's why there are mediators and like you said, you were held hostage, and they're hostage negotiators, because this stuff is just naturally arises. I don't know if there's any practical way to avoid it.
Yeah, you're right. So in the interest of time, first of all, your answer is right. And secondly, what you said is part of the answer. It's human nature. But I would even argue, what I usually argue in programs is that it is also corporate nature. Just very simple. What is the objective of a marketing director? It's to maximize, for example, brand awareness in the market. What is the CFO's number one target? Is to save as much money in order to optimize return on investment, profit, right? And therein already is a conflict. The whole target system in a company is actually automatically leading to a conflict, because we have target conflicts. However, it's how the company, the teams and the leaders work together, whether these conflicts flame up into open revolt, right, or become a crisis, or they can work it out as compromise. So conflicts and crises are by and large unavoidable, but the severity of them can be. So second page, already a lot of you have answered. So we go through. How many crises do you deal with every month? 1 to 2 seems to be the slight majority, but 1.8 said, I am constantly in crisis mode. I don't think it's changing. So anybody who is constantly in crisis mode, are you daring to speak up? Well, the key answer is, maybe now I realize maybe I should have given another option of 0. Maybe there will be people that actually say, oh, I'm never in a crisis mode. But what we see here is that crises are felt, conflicts and crises are felt by most of us almost constantly. And then the point is, how do we deal with this? Maybe also self-reflection of why we think it's a constant crisis mode. And the last question on this list was the one word describing the most factor action for effective crisis resolution. Seems the word cloud, because we have only a few people, doesn't really have one prominent word that was repeated, but we see communication in the middle, not anymore. Compromise, I just mentioned. Negotiation, listening. Well, listening, negotiating, and communicating are basically the same thing in a way, right? They're all about communication. So we could all put communication together. Then maybe that's the key thing. The other points here on the sheet are not equally unimportant. Interesting that listening now popped up as the major word. It's also a part of effective and now it's communication, right? So that actually brings us to the topic of today. We start with situational crisis communication theory by Coombs, and it basically consists of 2 aspects. And the first aspect is the attribution in different ways of looking at it. Sometimes it's called crisis types. because the type of crisis is at the same time the attribution, and the attribution means who is at fault with this crisis, right? And the crisis type is also describing where does this crisis come from. And there's basically just three aspects or dimensions, and the first one is are the victim crisis. So the victim crisis means a crisis hit, but we are not at fault. We have not caused the crisis. We are victims of the crisis. Anybody very quickly can give an example of a victim crisis?
Hello, Michael. I mean, victims, it can be significant impact that can occur around. I mean, you want to have a classic one that's occurred around the world recently will be like a public health crisis itself, the COVID-19 situation.
The pandemic itself, yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
In essence, almost everybody and every organization were a victim of that, right? Yeah. Exactly. Other examples are floods, tsunami, earthquake, wildfire, which just may be because of thunderstorm. So these are typical victim crises. The second one is the accidental crisis. So you might as well say COVID may have been an accidental crisis. Most people and organizations in the world were victims, but somebody may have caused the accident. So there's an accidental crisis. And then the third one are the preventable crises. It becomes a little complicated in the nuances because an accidental crisis could also be a preventable crisis if we should have had precautions in place to prevent the accident, right? But let's say accidents, just like you said before, what did you say? It's human nature to have crisis or conflict. It's also human nature to have accidents, right? So accidents happen, but then when we have clear guidelines, for example, in health and safety that we have in companies, but something was not covered, and then there is an accident because it was not covered, then it's a preventable crisis. So that's the first types by attribution. The second dimension of the situational crisis communication theory is the severity, right? How much is the impact? How severe is the impact of a crisis, right? And again, Coombs has basically three dimensions. The first one is disruptive. The second one is critical. And the third one is catastrophic. So once again, I would like one volunteer to think what could be a disruptive crisis.
I mean, if we look at the situation with the oil prices, it could actually run the gamut based on what country you are. So wealthy countries, it's disruptive, it increases oil prices. People are upset, but it's okay. For some countries, like let's say Indonesia, for them it's critical, so they're cutting down on using oil because they simply need it. And for some countries that rely on things like things that are made with oil, like fertilizers and whatnot, it could be catastrophic if there are failures in crops. So it's the same crisis, but it has different levels based on the country.
Yeah, this is a very good take on this, and bringing it actually a little bit further. That's very good. So one person, and this is very important when we come back to the attribution, one countries or organizations or persons' disruptive crisis could be another's catastrophic crisis. Absolutely right. And I just also pointed out disruptive in this crisis theory specifically because in the last 20 years, the word business disruption, disruption has become a little bit a buzzword, right? In the crisis discussion, disruption is something that is temporary and can also be more or less easily be solved, right? And the most classical example in a production environment is maybe there is a machine failure. So for a certain period of hours or days, the production is hampered by one machine not working. So of course we may have to delay customer orders, which may make customer upset, unhappy, but within days we can fix the machine and then we are up and running again. So the disruption is the weakest of all crises and we can manage easily. And catastrophic, that's why there's a skull. The catastrophic is usually either our production, our supply chain is permanently disrupted. So now we have the permanency in there. That means it cannot be solved, or at least it cannot be solved without a lot of effort, or we have literally damage of health and safety, even death, right? That is the catastrophic. So once again, the situational crisis communication theory talks about the attribution by who's to blame, basically, and the severity. So let's start with the preventable case, the preventable crisis, right? So the example is here, a supplier is flagged for substandard working conditions in an internal audit. Despite warnings, the supplier remains in the company network due to cost savings. The violation becomes public after a media expose. So in your, I need a volunteer or opinion, in your opinion, where does this one fall on the crisis spectrum?
No, so I think this is disruptive.
Yeah.
This is disruptive because I think this is temporary.
That's good. Okay. Do we have another opinion?
Yeah, Brian here. I would actually have gone with what is the strategic alignment that has been agreed upon by the senior leadership itself. Because depending on their risk tolerance and with regards to their emphasis on which part of the business strategy that they wish to emphasize on, some of it may focus more on the branding or their own ability to meet up their business delivery operations or requirements itself. It may actually be escalated to critical because there is a part of the marketing comms you need to get involved. There may be legal liabilities which may go into fines and damages and even loss of accounts and failures or lapses in the contractual agreements. But it depends on industry and which company itself. Some emphasize more in this aspects. Some may actually scale it down and even take it as acceptable risk, just the cost of doing business as well. So
yeah, absolutely right. I can actually say that both of you are right. It's indeed about the severity that is put on this case, depending on, first of all, the actual impact. So, for example, either the media expose itself is hitting the reputation of the company, and then that is a long distance, a long way to repair this damage. So it's in itself could be critical, or you have customers that actually jump off your ship and choose another supplier, right? Then you have a critical situation of lost revenue, but it could also be just disruptive if it's contained, if it's relatively minor, if it can be fixed. It is most likely not catastrophic, because catastrophic is either in human terms a harm, physical harm or death, or in a company speak, it would be leading to permanent closure, for example, right? Insolvency, which most likely we will not have in this case. So you see the accidental crisis. So in an effort to generate momentum, leadership announces aggressive product rollout timelines before ensuring all internal teams are fully aligned and ready. Where do you see this on the spectrum?
This could be, I think, critical to disruptive, to the catastrophic, depending on how short falling, because leadership is kind of jumping to launching something that is not ready yet.
Yep.
And the company is pressurized to launch, and that leads to major customer dissatisfaction, product recalls. So I think it could impact the brand.
Yes, you're right. So again, it's a judgment call based on how much is the impact really on the total company performance and how well can it be contained. So I share this one particularly because sometimes we think about accidents that is like somebody trips over a wire, some box falls off in the warehouse, falls off the rack. That's an accident, little fire here. But actually, accidents also can happen in business processes and communication, just like this one. Okay, very good. So the key point of the exercise is before we even communicate and before we even react to crisis, we should first analyze the crisis. In our own crisis, we need to first think about, are there victim crises? Are there accidental or preventable crises? And then think about the severity.
One quick question. So why this one is called accidental? Because this is intentional, because we are launching something, it's not ready yet.
I don't think the management intentionally decided to go ahead with the product launch. They were maybe over ambitious, and so accidentally they say, no, we go forward right now with this product launch, and forgot that all their business teams are not ready yet, not aligned yet. Let me go back very quick so that we have also time for the other framework. So this is the overall view of the situational crisis communication theory. I can only encourage you to Google it. I also later have a list of sources. There is a very good video recorded by Timothy Coombs on YouTube. It's only 7 minutes, but it's so powerful. In 7 minutes, he talks about his theory and how that can apply for our day-to-day conflict and crisis management. So on the right side, we see the key components. We talked about crisis types already. Like I said, it's attribution, victim, preventable, accident. And it in the same way, it is categorizing them in this way as types. Then we talked already about the attribution of responsibility. And other key components are crisis response strategies, stakeholder communication, and very important, reputation management. What crisis response strategies do we have?
Yeah, so I was saying I'm from cybersecurity. So I think in cybersecurity world, it's called incident response, right? That means
responding.
I'm prepared enough ahead in time. I know the different scenarios, and depending on the scenarios, I have a way forward, roles and responsibilities, which number to call, how to mitigate risks, basically.
Right. Okay.
So that's one. Incident response is a strategy.
Yeah, incident response. Okay, I think we will have this on the list. Yeah. So in the context of the situational crisis communication theory, basically Timothy Coombs talks about the four basic crisis response strategies that people or companies are generally taking. Right, so it's a basic list of observation how companies, for example, are reacting to crisis, and it starts with denial. So the denial of the existence of the problem itself, right? Or downplaying, diminish means, yeah, there is something happened, but it's not that severe, it's not that important. Let's just go on, move over it. Then the third one is basically what you mentioned before, the incident response strategy, right? The rebuilding. That means accepting the crisis, responding to the crisis, and then building and rebuilding on top of the crisis to solve it and to be better prepared for the future. And the last strategy, which is often observed, is the bolstering. The bolstering means based on previous track history of crisis response that we have shown, we can say, yes, we know this is a big crisis that has hit us, but we have mastered other crises in the past. So please trust us. Please do not despair. We will solve this crisis as well. So there is no real positive or negative rating to this. It's something that is observed. But we can see, for example, denial generally has a negative connotation to it, because denying responsibility for something we should be responsible for is probably not a good idea, or is generally looked upon negatively. However, you also mentioned the aspect of legality. Or we are clearly in a victim crisis situation, but maybe the public doesn't see it that way, or the media doesn't display it in that way, that we are a victim. Then we may need to deny responsibility or deny the severity of the crisis. So look at them not with a rating of good and bad and medium, but more like these crisis response strategies exist, but we need to take them appropriately according to the situation we are in, right? For example, diminish, downplaying, also dangerous, but if we are in a preventable crisis that, however, is just disruptive, it is basically maybe better for our stakeholders to be reassured by the management, by communication, to say, yes, we had a failure in our supply chain. The failure is contained. There will be no major further consequences for our supply chain and delivery to customers. We are fixing the problem, but don't make too much out of it. That will reassure stakeholders, rather than we are making an elephant out of a mosquito, as we say. I don't know if it's in English, but in Germany we say that. The second, and this is for Timothy Coombs and also for me, a very important aspect I want to share with you today, that is, we talk about the attribution of responsibility. The key point, however, is we need to consider not only what we think as the center of the crisis, what we think is the attribution of responsibility. So we may think we are the victim, but because of public perception, stakeholder perception, media perception, the public may think the other way. So in our crisis response, we not only need to look from our perspective, do we feel we are a victim, or are we the instigators, but we need to look at what the stakeholders think and then react appropriately. And you see it on the bottom, a very important aspect of effective crisis communication is to understand our reputation. If we have already a tarnished reputation, we will be very critically viewed if we take a denial or diminish, or even a bolstering, like, yeah, no worries, we have always had a great track record of solving crisis, but nobody buys it, right? So it could actually backfire to our organization. The situational crisis communication theory from Coombs is very useful to categorize crisis, right? By the attribution and by the severity. And according to that, we can build our response, communication, and resolution plan. The 4R framework for crisis communication by Heath is purely focusing on the planning of the communication by 4 R's. Let me walk you through this. So the 4 R's are readiness, response, reassurance, and recovery, right? So the first big message of today, of course, is we should always be prepared for a crisis. In many areas, maybe we are not ready yet. For example, in sales teams with our customer relationship, or in supply with our suppliers, or in the supply chain in some areas. So readiness is really about risk management. Then, of course, response, assessing, timely and accurate information sharing, communication, and how do we limit impact. Reassurance, so response is basically your first response, right? Then the reassurance is the continuous transparency, also about how did the fire actually come about, right? How quickly were we able to respond to it? How did we help the workers that may have been afflicted by the fire? So that is a reassurance to show the stakeholders that we are actively working on it. And finally, we go into the recovery mode, restoration, evaluation. And the most important point is probably a very good A to A from readiness to recovery is adaptation. We should not just have solved the crisis, but also learned from the crisis, adapted our processes and policies so that we prevent this kind of crisis in the future. We know we cannot prevent crises overall, but maybe we can learn and prevent this particular crisis. So the final thing, and it's a very critical point, we talked about the attribution of responsibility and effective communication to stakeholders. In terms of framing a crisis in communication with stakeholders, we basically have two options. And here it's really black and white, good and bad. We have positive framing, or we have toxic positivity. We want to always have the positive framing, right? And positive framing means we acknowledge that there is a crisis. So denial could be about there is a crisis, but we are not responsible for it, but we will take care of it. That can be denial, but we cannot deny that the crisis does not exist or that the impact doesn't exist, right? Acknowledging reality, addressing the challenges, encouraging dialogue, not trying to hide away, identify solutions and benefits, and also learning opportunities. So that's positive framing. That's what I would like you to keep in mind. Toxic positivity is basically the opposite. However, maybe after the session, think about yourself, how often you were confronted. Some of you said you are constantly in crisis mode, but how often every day you are confronted by a coworker, a team member, like, oh, we really have a problem in our process. We really have a problem in our supply chain. And how often did you say, don't worry about that. It's not our focus right now. We need to focus more on other things. That is actually on the brink of toxic positivity if it's really an issue. First of all, you shut down your colleague to share with you these kind of observations he has. On the other hand, it doesn't help to solve a problem that may be there. Final slides before the closing from my side. Key takeaways is, so the effective crisis response is to first not jump into crisis resolution, but to understand the crisis, right? Is it victim, preventable, accidental? Severity, so means, is it disruptive, contained? Is it critical? So we need to put more manpower and time behind it. Or is it catastrophic, where we also have to deal with people harm or permanent new situations, right? Understand the different response strategies. But most importantly, understand what others think about the attribution of responsibility and your reputation in the past. Be prepared. So the first R in the 4R framework, right? Readiness. And when you're ready, you can trust your team. Overall, stay level-headed, stay positive, cool, keep a cool mind as a leader, and always frame positively. Do not deny that something exists, but say that it exists and that we are dealing with it, right? So coming back to the readiness, Confucius already said 2000 years ago, the superior man, when resting in safety, does not forget that danger may come. The basic of risk and issue management. Like I said, there are many sources here, a couple of videos, podcasts, and articles. This is actually pretty neat, and you can upload it into your agentic AI right away. For crisis communication, the leadership playbook. So basically, it describes the do's and the don'ts for each of the R's: readiness, do and don't, and what should be the leadership mindset. Response, do, don't; mindset, do, don't, for reassurance and recovery. I think it's pretty neat to train leaders and contributors on how to think and act in each of these steps. And you can also even train your AI on it, but don't unleash the AI to the world right away. Yeah.
So we want to close the session officially, but then if there is some question, someone is still have time to be left behind, then they can stay over to ask question. Thank you, Michael, very much. I thank everyone who have joined, and feel free to jump to your next meeting and leave if you have to. But if you want to stay behind because you have a question, feel free to stay for a few more minutes.
Okay. No, yeah. So that was my last question, which so yeah, so I see that there are different from left to right in terms of manageable versus not manageable, correct? And my initial question was, yeah, there are challenges, and which one you call it crisis versus which one you would not. And that question came from your two examples that you cited at the start of the discussion. So yeah, if there is any border, I know it's a bit of a vague question, but is there any borderline or any challenges
Yes.
with crisis depending on how I classify it?
I think there is a progression, so there is not a hard border. And I think it's complicated because one organization may think a temporary failure of a production line is only disruptive, maybe because they have enough buffer stock, maybe they have another production line to cover. So for them, it's disruptive. But for another one that doesn't have additional capacity and warehouse space, maybe it's at least critical. So it depends a little bit on individual case, but you could say a disruptive is contained in terms of scale and time. It can be solved within a relatively short time, and you definitely do not have a permanent impact. Right, so that could be a definition.
So maybe it's connected a bit with tolerance also, because tolerance could differ company to company, people to people, and that would define how I'm classifying it.
Yeah, that's right. And then critical absolutely is something where we have an impact on timelines, on results. I mean, if we talk about profit-making organizations, right, it's all about the numbers. So that if it has a considerable impact on the profit and loss sheet, you could say also, if we actually have put people in harm's way, maybe it should be catastrophic if there's death involved or severe injury. But if you have, like, for example, a warehouse worker has a broken leg, it can be solved, but it's definitely a critical issue because you have to deal with insurance, with the family, with the victim himself. Right, so that one is definitely critical. And the definition for catastrophic is absolutely, something is permanent. So death is permanent. The warehouse is burned down. Yeah, you could say we can build it up, but for a considerable period of time, that warehouse is gone, and all the products that were in the warehouse are gone. They are just gone. So catastrophic is definitely something that is permanent, that is not replaceable in value or in life. Does it answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I do actually have a quick question, just to pick your brain itself. Now, in the last few years, there has been this push to use generative AI to do as a form of researching or solutioning to crisis situations. I'm not a supporter of it because depending on how the prompt engineering is done, or sometimes when the solutioning, you use the solutioning not to generate ideas, but to find, but you use it as a way to use default answering itself. But that creates a lot of problems because no two situations, I mean, it can be similar. I mean, in the past, like, in the past, like you can have two similar incidences for crises in two different countries, but it can be completely different outcomes, things you need to do. I would like to actually get your own insights and get your own expertise. What are your thoughts for using or applying generative AI in the field of crisis management? Is it suitable, or is it something that is not suitable itself?
I'm going partially with you actually, because there are two reference points. The first one is when we look at global financial crises over the last 100, since basically the Industrial Revolution, we talk about over 100 something years, every single global crisis was a different one. We had the oil crisis in the 70s, 80s. We had the global financial crisis in 2007-8 based on what was it? The substandard mortgage loan crisis. We had COVID in 2020 and on. What else we had in the past? So every financial crisis have always been different. And the second one is if in the time of COVID at the beginning, they have used AI to provide the best, let's say, crisis response and political response to the crisis, AI would have not been able to give a full correct answer. It would have hallucinated, because there was never something in this scale as a pandemic, a global pandemic. So I agree with you. Every crisis is different, and some crises don't have a direct precedence. And AI, large language models, and generative AI are basing their knowledge on what already exists. So it's very dangerous to trust on these tools to come up with a solution for which it actually cannot have a solution in the first place.
Exactly.
However, as a tool to assist, because we can, for example, say our warehouse burned down, please give us a crisis response plan based on other companies' warehouse cases where other warehouses were burned down. Then the generative AI can give me such a response plan. But very important in any case, using AI, don't use this verbatim. I don't say, hey, boss, ChatGPT just gave me a crisis response plan. Let's take it. No, I need to use my human brain power and my teamwork and alignment with stakeholders to adapt it to our situation, right?
Yes, exactly.
At this point, the AI are not there yet.
You can also, I mean, a middle way down the road is to actually create your own AI agent. You can, for example, in some of them like ChatGPT and Claude, you can set up a project and you call that project crisis response. You feed it with as much information that you have, previous templates, communication scenarios, right?
Using the past examples, like you say, teach the AI.
Maybe an argument that goes also with what Aaron just said is an argument for whoever you have to convince is it's very dangerous. For example, you ask generative AI, please write a crisis response letter to our key account customer about the recent data leak. Right? ChatGPT will give you a letter within 5 seconds, right? Then let's say you send it out to your customer. The customer most likely will spot very quickly whether that is genuine or it's AI generated. And if it's AI spotted as AI generated, the customer will say, well, now they're really pissing me off, sorry for the language. they are not even genuine enough to, communicate in a normal human way with me. And then it backfires even more. So yes, we can use AI, train it over time, get better and better, but we need the human hand still in there, and it needs to be, like you said, nuanced per market, per geography, country, culture, right?
Yeah. What about a crisis communication template? Like you want to send out like an advisory or something as a press release. I did this during the COVID situation itself because we had so many updates coming in, and because I was a regional manager at the time, every country was different. So I literally had to write all my email advisories or my situation reports piece by piece and put in.
Right.
But so the communications team at the time that I was with, they were insisting on having a holistic communication plan itself. So they were insisting on using a crisis communication template that can be generatively AI, but I was staunchly against it because there's a lot of empathetic points. You see, you need to check on this information and the language, especially every country's language delivery is very different. And we tried it out for a couple of months back in 21, 22. I can't remember when exactly. It was a disaster. Thankfully, we didn't send anything to the staff members. At the time, it was meant to be a general staff internal communication itself. And to be fair, the director I was with, the MD I was with at the time, he was very supportive, and he actually agreed that it was not worth the effort and time that we needed to put in. But that was 2 years ago. I mean, that was a few years back. Currently, I mean, I met with some security professionals. They are pushing this agenda about having it in crisis comms again. I'm still against it, but maybe you have a more updated viewpoint on this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a little bit on the fence on this, like you. I mean, I'm also a change management professional, and in change management, using templates and repeatable document types and templates is very common. But then in a change, you could say, okay, we're going against people's resistance, right? But then people want to see the updated information on the change. They want to know what's in it for them. How are they supported? So they don't worry so much about the nuances of the communication in itself. In a crisis, you are very right. It's very much goes to the sentiment of people, empathy, right? The empathic part. I think the tendency to go to templates is, of course, repeatability and efficiency, and especially repeatability. And it's also a type of risk management, because if a leader team or a team, I'm not so confident and not so well trained on responding to crisis, if they can use a template, at least they can follow a certain guideline and then avoid mistakes. But avoiding mistakes is not a good crisis response strategy, right? I would say, it's tricky to answer, because in my heart, it actually says I would more invest in holistic crisis response strategy and plan guideline, and I would spend time and money on training and retraining key leaders and key contributors on how to appropriately respond to crisis. And I can show them examples, but not templates. They should still come up with it by themselves. I think I follow your mindset as well a little bit. Does that make sense?
But I think what Michael has suggested, you have an overarching template, but you have two leaders who will still fine-tune whatever template needs to go on. It's going to be critical. Yeah. Communication is not a one thing fits all. It's different for every single person you talk to.
That's right.
Yeah. If you go into a room, 3 different people are there, your communication is different. 2 people come in, the communication changes.
Yeah.
So essentially, face-to-face, physical, eating the people has to be different. But you can have a template.
Okay. All right.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much, Michael.
Yeah.
I appreciate your shares and the insights on this.